Welcome to another episode of Readers and Writers, brought to you by the Publishing Club of Laguna Woods. Today's guest is Pat Spencer. She is an author of 2 books, Golden Box Tea in the Fry Pan and Stolen Girl. She has also authored a textbook and has written newspaper and magazine columns. In September, she presented at the Southern California Writers Conference in Irvine. Her topic was, yes, you can traditionally publish without a literary agent. I promised Pat that we wouldn't spend too much time talking about publishing without an agent, since her in-person presentation will occur at the Publishing Club meeting on January 17th, 2024, at the Performing Arts Center. So see the Publishing Club for a website for more details. But I will ask Pat to give us a little teaser about what the audience can expect to hear from her.
You'll hear from me my experiences, and my presentation is really based on what I wish someone had told me when I was a new author, when I was first trying to publish. But it seems that this idea that you can publish without a literary agent, you can publish with a traditional publisher, it's a secret.
Oh.
And it's hard to find out.
Oh.
And so I have this PowerPoint, and I'm just laying it out, and I'm giving out handouts. Log on here, log on there,
Oh.
and then I am also talking about the benefits of publishing with these particular traditional publishers that will accept your manuscript for consideration without the interference of an agent, and what's good about it, what's difficult, what's hard, the pros and cons of going each way, and just because I wish someone had told me.
Yes, well, that's a very good reason to do it, for sure. So both your books have been published with a publishing house, but not using an agent.
Actually, Story of a Stolen Girl, this one, is not traditionally published. I published this one myself with KDP, and my husband did the cover. We did this one, and he said, "I don't want to ever do that again."
Huh? What was that he didn't ever
He
want to
did
do
the
again?
cover, the back cover, and he's not artistic, and he's not happy doing that kind of thing on the computer, and he did the formatting. He did all the unfun and the really hard technical stuff, and he just said, "I really don't want to do that again." And so I thought, okay, I've got to do it some other way. What do I do? And so I started doing the research, and so Golden Box Tea in the Fry Pan is published by a small traditional publisher in Texas, and so we didn't have to do the cover. He didn't have to do anything, which was his preference. And then I have a trilogy called Sticks in a Bundle that is under contract with Scarsdale Publishing, which is a small traditional publisher, no agent required, and so that one is in the works.
Oh, so one thing I will tell our audience is that with no publisher, that means you get to keep more of the profits,
with
correct?
no agent, yes.
Oh, excuse me, with no agent,
right,
yes.
with no agent.
Yeah.
With no publisher, you do it yourself, you get to keep all of the royalties. So you do give up something to have the traditional publisher, yes.
And I think typically an agent takes about 15%. Yes. That's substantial.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's great. And I love that name, that box tea in the fry pan. Now, I understand that box tea is pancakes?
It's Irish potato pancakes. And the autocorrect on Amazon, when you try to look up the book, it takes you to fry pans. A whole array. There's wrought iron pans, there's Teflon pans, there's everything. But up in the little corner on the left, it says, "Did you really mean Golden Box Tea?" And you click on that, and the whole time I'm muttering, "Yes, stupid." That's what I typed in. And then you can get to the book, but it is... that autocorrect, that artificial intelligence is not always so smart.
Yes, yes, that is true. That is true. And thank goodness that we still have our own intelligence to be able to bypass that.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you wish to tell our audience a little bit about Golden Box Tea?
Golden Box Tea. Show the cover. I'm very proud of the cover because I did the art. And so Golden Box Tea is based on my mother's experiences in the 1930s, daughter of Irish immigrants, and the trials and tribulations of the Irish. Their family never recovered after the potato famine. The potato famine happened much before that, but they never got their traction again, and so they came to the United States to find the American dream, and they were met instead by the Great Depression, the poverty. Both of the father and the grandfather were alcoholic, hardworking, but when a lot of the money is going to feed that alcoholic.
Drink, yes.
Yes, and so it's about Katie, who is my mother, and her strength, her ability to overcome, which was really great. You don't know that when you're a child. Sometimes
Yes.
you don't realize it until you're older. It's about the family bonds, great love between those siblings, and the tragedies, and then the overcoming of those tragedies, and highly orchestrated by my mom.
Oh,
So it has trials and tribulations, but they're overcome, and the ending is a lot of fun and very uplifting.
oh, wonderful. We could use that these days.
Yes.
Especially because your other book, although it does have a happy ending,
It does.
deals with a very scary topic.
Yes, it does.
Yes, yeah. So Stolen Girl focuses on the dark world of human trafficking, particularly sex trafficking.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes. There's many different types of trafficking. My interest, my efforts to try to do something to make a difference are focused on children and young women. And Story of a Stolen Girl, it also has a satisfying, a happy ending. But they do, again, it is family bonds. This is a family of 3 women. There is no man who comes in and saves the day.
I noticed that, yeah.
It's a woman's problem, and the women have to solve it, and they do. It is fiction, but it is based a lot on the interviews that I have done with survivors, those girls' personalities, their experiences, the bonds that they formed, and how the great lengths they will go to help each other, to protect each other.
Yes.
And that strength and that love that grows out of a horrible experience, but then again, they overcome and things are good at the end.
Yes, yes. In fact, I noticed, and I found it a little hard to believe, but as you portray it the way you did, I get it reading Story of a Stolen Girl when Darby, the abducted girl, befriends another girl that's placed with her roommate. And they seem to become fast friends. And I was like, well, that seems awful fast for an environment where people are being abused and neglected. But I guess what you're saying is because they share that bond of abuse and neglect, they latch onto each other fairly intensely.
They do,
Yes.
very intensely, very, yes.
And then it reminds me, I mean, you're talking about the family in Golden Box Tea, where they had ordeals, not the same,
Yes.
but they too formed really strong bonds.
Yes,
Yes.
those connections are amazing, and I'm awed by children who rise up from some horrible experiences to become normal people who
Yes.
have satisfying lives.
Yes.
You know, they rise above what they've gone through, and that's true. My mother had one sister and 6 brothers, surviving brothers. There was a baby that only lived 10 days. There was a boy 1 year older than her that died. My cousins and I have not been able to find out exactly when, but less than a year he lived. And then my grandmother died of an illegal abortion, and so there were actually 9 pregnancies. This poor woman, and she died when she was 37 years old.
Oh my!
Yes,
That's
so
that's
it was
very
rough.
young.
So the kids had to grow up fast, and they had to grow up together, and it didn't have a lot to do with their chronological age. They had to take on things that no child should have to, suffered losses that no child should have to. But every single one of them turned out to be productive, have families of their own. They all pledged that nothing like that would ever happen to their children, and that is their, in my mind, their biggest success, because it didn't. The families stayed together, and the kids became productive, hardworking, summer teachers, you know, different professions, and so it just amazes me that inner strength that a child can pull up and, and rely on.
Yes, it's, I mean, I don't really like the saying, but if it doesn't kill you, you get stronger.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and getting back to the story of the stolen girl, so you had some police characters in there, law enforcement, but some of them you didn't portray too, like they were bumbling. So, but you have a son who's in.
Yes. Yes.
So,
I have
how did you end up doing that?
Well, I have a son who has a lifelong career in police work, and I'll tell you a little funny story about him. When we first started out, he was a detective at that time, and his best friend, who I'm called his number 2 mom. He is my number 2 son. Was also a detective, and I would call and ask questions. And after about the 3rd or 4th phone call, my son Jeff says, and I'm asking about police procedures and about kidnapping and about drugs. And after about the 3rd or 4th call, he says, "Mom, is there something you need to tell me?" I said, I'm writing a book. He goes, "Oh, thank goodness." He thought I was delving into the underbelly of society. But I relied on those 2 being intensely. They were for procedures. And I had heard enough stories and watched enough TV, you know, that in every job, not everybody's as good as they ought to be. And just because I love my son and I'm very proud of what he does, doesn't mean that there aren't mistakes that, you know, we're all human beings, things happen. None of these things that went wrong here were my son's, but they are their life. You know, not everything goes perfectly, and all of my characters have their own flaws, because just like myself, my friends, my family, once you get to know us, you'll find we all have our own little flaw, and I like to think that's what makes us interesting.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
So I hope that's true of my characters too.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So I wanted to, well, is there anything else you want to tell us about? I'm trying to think if there's anything else that stood out for me for Stolen Girl. No, I think, is there anything else you want to share? Because I'd like to switch over to like human trafficking, and we could talk a little bit about that.
Let's do that.
Okay, and before I go there, just quickly, was there some kind of personal connection? I mean, you said you heard girls' stories, but you were the president of a school, right? And so how did you end up getting, because it feels personal. That book feels personal to me when I read it.
Yeah. It is personal, and there are certain jobs which people hold where they are told things in confidence, and I started out as a cosmetology instructor at Riverside Community College, and then worked my way up the administrative ranks. But I also worked as a hairdresser when I got right out of high school. I had no idea what I wanted to be or do. And my mother said, well, you're through going to the beach every day, and you like to do your hair and makeup, so why don't you sign up for cosmetology?
Oh.
So I did. And as we all know, the relationship between a client and a cosmetologist, there's a lot of conversation goes on there.
Yes.
And as when I was first a dean, I was one of the few female deans in our local college, and so the females would gravitate to me when they needed help or they just needed someone to talk, and talk they did. And I wanted to do something. I wanted to make a difference, and I struggled with, well, you know, what can I do? I can help these girls, I can get them services, I can do this little bit here, but what can I do? When I retired, this story had been bouncing around in my head probably for 20 years, and I just decided, okay, here's what I can do. While I was working, I was a pretty successful nonfiction writer, and so I decided I wanted to try the fiction, and I thought, okay, this is what I can do. I can write a story that's based on what's going on, and put it out as a way of enlightening people about what's going on, because people don't believe that human trafficking happens in the United States or happens to American citizens.
Yes.
And that is just dead wrong.
Yes.
It's dead wrong.
Was there, though, a specific story, without revealing anything personal, that really struck you, that you heard when people were talking to you?
No, I think it was kind of a building of the survive. At the time, I just talked to girls who were being wooed or had been wooed, or who were in the first stages of being susceptible to being trafficked. The number one indicator that a young girl is likely to be susceptible to trafficking is that they have been molested.
Absolutely.
And right now, I have heard statistics that say anywhere from 1 to 3 to 1 to 5 girls is molested as a child.
Yes, yes.
Excuse me. And that it is commonly, almost always, a male that they trust.
Yes.
It's a family member, it's a pastor, it's a doctor, it's an uncle, it's the brother's friend.
Neighbor, yes.
Yes, a neighbor. And so I wanted to learn more after I retired, and I started getting involved with a couple of fundraising, with a human trafficking walk, and then had the access to, but that's kind of professional. I got to know some of the girls, and they trusted me enough to tell me their stories. And so every story in here is based on something I heard from a survivor, but changed enough that they would never be identified or tracked down.
Yes, yes.
What Nina does to rescue her daughter, at the time I wrote this, had never, ever, ever been done by any woman. It has now.
Oh, my.
A woman in India did what she did to rescue her daughter.
Wow.
And it made international news. It was just huge. So
yes. Oh, well, So what I'd like to do for our audience is just to explain a little bit about human trafficking. And anytime you want to jump in, feel free. It sounds like, because I was nodding my head before, because I know those statistics that you spoke of. And you are absolutely right. You know, girls who, or even boys who have been molested, they're at higher risk for being trafficked.
Yes.
Here in the United States.
American citizens.
Yes,
Yep.
yes. So human trafficking is a form of modern day slavery that involves the use of force, fraud, coercion to obtain some type of labor or commercial sex act. Now, worldwide, it is estimated that 68% of human trafficking is forced or exploitative labor. 68%. Now that includes forcing someone to rob, facilitate a drug deal, secure other victims, as well as domestic help or in agriculture. And fairly recently in our city of Irvine, a couple was arrested for having a forced domestic worker. I found that unbelievable. And then in Brazil, individuals are forced to work in fields in desolate locations in the presence of armed guards to make sure they don't run away. I mean, they cannot escape the work. Anywhere where an affordable labor force is needed, the opportunity for sex trafficking and human trafficking exists. And we can recall that some of our railroads were built by Chinese. That was forced labor. Additionally, enslaved laborers, along with wage earners, built our White House. So this is not a new thing.
No, it's not new, but it's growing.
Yes.
It is growing. I've heard people say, well, we just think it is because we hear more about it. No, it is growing.
Yes.
It is now in the United States a $32 billion economic enterprise, I guess you could say.
Yes,
$32 billion. And the best statistic I could find said that last year, under 1,500 charges were placed.
Oh, charges
Were placed against traffickers.
Oh, wow. That's not a lot.
No, it's nothing.
Yes,
It's
yes.
barely a drop in the bucket.
Yes, and I read that charges for labor, forced labor, are not that great. Or is it the other way around, sex trafficking? I don't remember.
It's for sex trafficking. Well, the charges obviously aren't enough to stop anybody.
Yes.
I'm not an expert in the labor because my focus is on children and women. But there is, Texas was actually the first state to make the purchase of sex a felony. And very, very few states have followed at this point. There is almost no penalty for the person who purchases sex. $500, $1,000, community service, maybe 6 months in jail, but for the most part, there's no penalty. And there's very little that has been successful in stopping it.
Yes.
For example, there is a online webpage that is housed in San Diego called Backpage, and it's.
I ran across it. Yes,
Yeah.
I didn't want to pull it up.
No,
my
I know.
computer.
Yeah, that was one of the things my son said. Do not be pulling this stuff up on your computer. Just look at it. And, but I don't know how we will ever stop it. If you can't stop men, 92% of sex traffickers are men. 80% of the victims are women and children.
Yeah.
But if you can't stop people from molesting their own children, their nieces, their nephews, their patients, their wards, how do you stop this larger enterprise? I mean,
Well, I can give a little bit of hope, because if a child can be identified as molested and can get therapy and support and be provided with a community larger than the system that's been abusing him or her, then there is a chance that they will not become victims. But I think the other thing is what we're doing right now, which is educating people.
yes, yeah.
Because when I first spoke to you, I could not believe what you were saying. I mean, and I'm a psychologist, and I've worked with survivors of torture, and I still, somehow this area escaped me. And I mean, I'm going to stress, it's only, and I don't want to say only, but 22% is sex trafficking. 68% is human trafficking. So that, I'm not saying that that sex trafficking isn't bad, but I'm saying there is an even larger problem out there that many, many, many people are forced to work against their will. And that is a horrible, horrible thing. And additionally, there's another 10% of human trafficking besides sex and work. And what do you think it is?
Well, there's organ donation.
That's right.
It's not donation, it's organ harvesting.
Yeah, it's called muti-murders. That's a very small percentage, but it occurs in South Africa. And what happens is the traditional medicine of some healers requires that organs from humans be procured. So people are murdered and their organs are harvested. And that is a form of trafficking. Another is what's going on right now, which is civil unrest and environmental catastrophes. Because when you have those situations, you have people who are displaced, who have maybe lost their identification, lost entire families. And those people are vulnerable to be preyed on, just like the young girl who's been molested. Not coerced necessarily, but perhaps they're looking for a place to escape to. And somebody comes to them and says, hey, we can get you into the United States, get you a nice job, get you a place to stay. Just give me $5,000. And what happens? They're into forced labor.
Well, and that's partially what happens with the young girls. They run away. They're trying to escape. They feel like the conditions that they're living in are so bad. And when a girl becomes about 13 years old, they feel so guilty. They feel it's their fault. They think they're to blame. And if they've told someone, they've probably been told not to say anything again. And this ugly mass of guilt and revulsion roils inside their being, and they say, okay, whatever's out there can't be as bad as what's right here.
Yes.
So they run away.
Yes.
And the average runaway girl is approached by a trafficker within 72 hours of being on the streets. And they're susceptible. And it is as easy as me saying, you look hungry and cold. Can I get you a blanket?
And
okay,
I do want to stop you because we're almost out of time.
Oh, okay.
But I do want to say that if you suspect that someone is a victim of trafficking, and you've told me this, do not try to intervene. Call the number, the National Human Trafficking Hotline, 1-888-373-7888. Or you can also text the word help or info to Be Free. This is also up on your screen, which is 233-733. And so you can make sure you get those numbers. Did you want to add something?
No, just call. If you see something suspicious, it's better to call and report it.
Yes.
Than to wonder forever if something was going on.
Yes, because it's so easy, like you said, for somebody to just say, oh, you're hungry, let me warm you up, let me buy you a hamburger, and then once it's grooming is what they call it, and soon that person.
One of the most used lines is, my wife would never forgive me if I left you here.
Oh.
She has a soft spot for girls like you.
Oh my goodness.
That's one of the most successful lines they use.
Very scary.
Very scary.
Yes.
Very
yes.
scary.
Well, Pat, we could go on and on.
Yes, we could talk for days. Yes, for days.
But I hope our audience has taken something away from this, and that we can, little by little, help the world be a better place. Remember, you can watch the show on Mondays and Thursdays at the usual times, 4:30 and 10:30, respectively. And thank you so much for being a guest.
Thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure, an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yes, I feel the same way. Thank you.